But again, if students are relying excessively on their parents' opinion, which were evolved in an era of scarcity, an 18-year-old has a right to vote to choose a prime minister. Person should be starting to think very deeply about what he or she wants to make of her life.
Do you think AGI would ever be able to answer the question? In seriousness, do you think we will see a sentient or a general intelligence to a point where it can actually answer some of the biggest questions that we have in the universe?
Core of India only does DSA and Dev, which now seems it's fairly automated and AI can do it much better than them. So they're in a very anxious state right now. What would your suggestion be to someone like this who wants to get into tech or AI?
I do think it's a golden age for building bootstrap businesses because AI gives so much of leverage. An engineer, a motivated engineer, doesn't need a great designer. You can use Bolt, Zero.
Is there a sense to go for a traditional 4-year degree? Anyways, you know what's being taught there, which is nothing related to what is being used today. So what are your thoughts?
I think in some sense, time doesn't exist for you before you were born. It'll never exist after you're dead. So this is all you got. And it's also interesting in science, none of the theories you can find now as a moment. I mean, they mean you well. Everyone's parents mean them well. But they might just be operating with a set of assumptions that are no longer true.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a new pod. Today we have Paras. We're on a clock right now. We only have 40 minutes, so we'll try to keep it actionable. This is for anyone who's currently in the age range of 18 to 25, currently trying to get into AI, web dev, generally worried about the industry and where it is going. We'll try to get his insights about how he feels an engineer should spend his time today. Paras is a entrepreneur. He started Wingify and recently exited it. You might have seen news all around about the exit. He's now running a smaller cohort of people that in which he'll talk more about it, but basically it's around AI and people trying to innovate for a year and trying to start up. We'll understand his journey, his insights about this industry. With that, Paras, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Would love an introduction from your side as well.
Sure. Okay. So, hi, I'm Paris. I used to run a company called Wingify, bootstrapped it from $0 to $50 million, and recently exited to a private equity company. And now I'm trying different kinds of experiments in AI under the brand of LossFunk. So I'm imagining it as an AI lab that's trying to push frontier AI from India for the world, but in different formats imaginable. For example, can you run a cohort where people are trying to build frontier stuff? Can you invite people for talks and so on? So I'm still trying to figure out what's the right way to attack this problem of why there is not enough frontier AI from India for the world.
And is this where you're spending most of your time today, like these days?
Yes, this is like we are sitting right there in the LossFunk new office. So this is where I'm spending most of my time.
Amazing. So for someone who's 18 to 25, I'm sure the ratio to get in here is really hard. What should they focus on considering AI is here and core of India only does, DSA and Dev, which now seems it's fairly automated and AI can do it much better than them. So they're in a very anxious state right now. What would your suggestion be to someone like this who wants to get into tech or AI?
Yeah, I think fundamentals are not going anywhere. If you have ever tried to work with Claude or ChatGPT on some problem, trying to generate code for some algorithm and so on, you would know that unless you understand the basics, you will just completely be taken in for whatever the output comes. I've noticed that there's lots of subtle flaws and subtle misses that unless you really know the subject well, that's then you're just it's sort of like you're blind to whatever LLM is putting. So and the AI is a huge leverage if you are very good on that subject, and that's very counterintuitive because people feel a subject becomes trivial if an AI is there, but it only becomes trivial once you know what that subject is in the first place. So all the fundamentals of how data structures work, how algorithms work, what different kinds of algorithms are there. I think knowing these fundamentals is a superpower for 18 to 25-year-old, a young person, when a lot of people are just throwing their hands and saying, why do I learn anything if AI is going to do it? And secondly, one is learning the fundamentals and actually trying to embrace AI as a productivity tool instead of fearing the AI. So it's mostly a mindset tool. So are you really thinking that AI is going to come after you, or you are thinking that AI is such a big leverage that you are going to get a productivity boost? So having a positive mindset there and knowing the fundamentals will put anyone who's young apart from a lot of other people or working with a state of fear. And lastly, I think focusing on things that AI cannot and will not do anytime soon is going to be a huge advantage. I mean, you should ask yourself that what is that right now only a human can do that AI cannot do. It's things like, let's say, trust building, things like physical community, things like explaining one to one to the other person and giving them comfort. So all the soft skills actually rise significantly more in value in the AI world versus non-AI world. So doubling down on them is obviously much much better. No AI is going to pitch to an investor for funding. Only a human can do, because a human can bet on human. So think about what rises in value when AI is doing a lot of stuff. It's just human soft skills.
Makes sense. There's this thought that the number of jobs would shrink because everyone is more productive now, and this might lead to smaller teams. Finally, since good engineers don't have a job, they'll start their own companies and end up doing well. This happened in finance a few years ago when the salaries shrunk. Everyone started their own hedge fund. Do you see a similar paradigm shift here?
I do think smaller teams will have bigger leverage. What used to require 100 people will require 10 people, and maybe in 10 years it'll require one person. But I see that as a good news, and good news because this means more and more things can be made possible in the world. If 100 people made one thing in the world, now 100 people will make 10 things in the world. And that's a good thing, which means if, for example, we were stuck with just one type of CRM in the world, which was Salesforce, why can't we have a million types of CRMs, which is so specific? Maybe software should exist for people who make educational videos for yourself. Right now, you're stuck with software that's made for a very broad based of categories. And I think the software will become niche and niche and niche, and ultimately, it will just benefit everyone.
So if someone wants to start an AI lab today, or sorry, a small team like this, and with their friends, should they focus on a small niche in a very big industry?
The Absolutely, I think the value of the fundamentals of value creation will always remain the same. Focus has to be how can you solve the needs of a specific niche much much better than the existing alternatives. Think of what domains you know well, things where you're already passionate about. Even if you're solving problems of, let's say, 10 or 50 or 100 people really really well, that's a really great start.
Got it. Amazing. We'd love to dive into your Wingify journey. How did you start? How did you blitz scale? You're probably one of the few bootstrapped companies that have done so well. So we'd love to understand the mindset, especially when everyone around you might have been raising, and you probably had a lot of options. How did you stick to bootstrapping and such a good exit?
I actually didn't know what VCs did until third or fourth year of the company. I was building this from Rohini in Delhi, a corner where no VC would come. So, and I think growing up, the sense that businesses are all about making more revenue than the cost, that was somehow very obvious to me. So we only increased the cost base by hiring new people once our revenue had jumped. By the time VCs came knocking to our doors, the company was scaled enough where whenever I asked why should I take money, no VC was able to explain, because for them taking VC funding was such an obvious thing that nobody questioned. So one thing about businesses is that the source of funding is a little bit immaterial to what good or bad businesses are. Somehow it's a very shallow understanding that VC businesses are good, raising funding is really great, and not raising funding is not great. I think that mindset is hurting a lot of entrepreneurs, where they might otherwise build, like, let's say, what would you prefer, building a business where you grow to an extent and sell it for, let's say, $10 million or $50 million, but the entire uh, exit is yours, versus building like $1 billion uh, company and selling it for $1 billion, but maybe you own 3% of equity of it. So the valuations and what the founder ultimately gets and the quality of business you end up building, I think all of these are very separate things. It's unfortunate that media celebrates just valuation numbers, but that's how news is, right? Where they want to latch onto numbers. But the quality of business is in just 100 different dimensions versus just one number, which is a valuation.
Makes sense. And now it's shrunk a lot. I would assume not everyone is raising, and VCs aren't throwing as much money.
I do think it's a golden age for building bootstrap businesses, because AI gives so much of leverage. An engineer, a motivated engineer, now uh, doesn't need a great designer. You can use Bolt V0. The copywriting comes automatically from for free from ChatGPT and so on. So the leverage is tenfold versus when I started. So at least to a certain extent, a motivated engineer, single person can bootstrap and build an amazing business for himself and herself, instead of just shooting for the moon with VC funding, where by definition 90-95% businesses don't end up working out. That's how VC math works out.
Now, speaking of bootstrapable business, right? These work when you're solving a real problem, and when someone is actually willing to pay money for it. So I'm curious to understand, how did you arrive at Wingify problem statement, or what was the driving force behind it? Did you personally face that problem, or you systematically arrived at it?
It was a long journey. I've been trying to build businesses ever since I was in college. Every After every 2 semesters, you have a summer break, and in that summer break, I was just trying to start up. So I did three different startups during my engineering college. They all failed. They did not work out, and that pushed me to introspect what was happening. And I realized that I was building stuff without knowing how to get users for it, and that pushed me to learn marketing. And eventually, the more I read about marketing, the more I started liking it. And then I just said, let's try to build a software in marketing. Let's combine two of my passions in coding and marketing. Then I built a marketing software called Wingify. I launched it and it failed again. People said it's too confusing, there are too many things in it. But I got initial set of users. I remember 25, 30 users. And some of them said, you're doing too many things, just do one thing and do it really well. So I started systematically thinking about which of the features I had built in marketing software should I be doubling down upon. And that's where I stumbled upon A/B testing as a feature to double down, because at that point of time there was a software called Google Website Optimizer, which was the number one in the field, but really bad. Even as an engineer, I couldn't use it, and supposedly it was marketed to marketers. I thought this was like a great opportunity to do what Google Website Optimizer does and do it like really, really easy. So I took the concept of A/B testing, which used to take a week because you had to code an HTML page, upload on your servers, and so on, and compressed it to 30 minutes, where in Visual Editor in my product, marketers can do the changes and do it. So this compression of a week to 30 minutes, and basically independence of marketing teams from the IT teams, that gave the product market fit. So products really work out when you create a significant addition in the efficiency in the world. You either save time, cost, complexity, cognitive load, increase their revenue. So help people do what they already want to do in much, much better form versus how they are doing. That's the basic of value creation. And obviously it's clear to me now, but in retrospect, it was just a lot of trial and error and eventually stumbling onto it.
How did you go about finding your first 100 customers? Because a lot of this wouldn't have been clear until you actually spoken to a number of them, right? So curious to understand,
Yeah,
like,
so
what
I
the
posted it on Hacker News, and from there I got first 25, 30 users, and that feedback loop started it all. Then I started in VW, started posting a lot of articles on what is A/B testing, how to do it. Started pushing case studies. For example, does red button work better or green button work better? What worked in my favor was I enjoyed writing. So I was literally writing a new article or a case study every single day, along with coding it, along with doing support. I was a single man army when I was doing it. But it was just the passion of the whole, and it wasn't passion about the industry. Obviously, I had never done an MBA. It's not like I was born and said I want to build an A/B testing company. It was a passion to create company as an almost like an art object, where you're making thousands of tiny decisions every single day on what goes on your homepage, how should commenting be on your source code, and so on. So it was just very blissful that you were just trying to decide everything that goes into making a company. So that passion, if that's not there, I think an entrepreneur just would just give up. I know a lot of engineers who said, hey, I can't distribute, I can't write articles, I can't. So if you keep on saying you can't, you obviously won't.
Right. That's very good insight. So you're saying the reason Wingify started really well was because you liked doing what you were doing. You would have anyways done it. It was just you were lucky that the market was really big and you could package it in a tech product.
Yeah, so 100%. I think if Wingify had failed, I would have tried the sixth time, the seventh time, the eighth time. So I know I would have cracked eventually some market. I don't know to what scale, but I'm just like banging my head until it cracks kind of a guy.
Yeah, now switching gears to AI, right? Why the name LossFunk?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, anyone who's into AI would know this. This comes from loss function, which is what drives all the training in AI models. So essentially, loss comes from the difference between what your model is predicting versus the ground truth in the data. And the whole point of loss function is to uh, give your optimizer a way to keep reducing this distance. So over a period of time, your model becomes a mirror of the data that it's getting trained on. I thought it was just a cool compression of loss function.
What are your thoughts on traditional education? Maybe back in the day, like a few years ago, it helped. At least communities in big colleges help. But what do you think today? Considering you have ChatGPT as a helper, tutoring is very easy. Is there a sense to go for a traditional 4-year degree? Anyways, you know what's being taught there, which is nothing related to what is being used today. So, what are your thoughts?
I think peers are extremely important at that age. I mean, at any age for that matter. Peers mostly from a motivation point of view, from a social skills building point of view, and so on. I think it's unfortunate, but it's true in India where uh, the the most accomplished people don't end up in the teaching industry. So our teachers, professors generally are the ones who have not seen the real industry. So there is a big disconnect in terms of what ends up being taught versus what the industry needs. So an ideal model really is where it's entirely peer driven. People are just inspiring each other, forming bonds, and so on. But eventually, being I mean, they should be doing like internships and jobs right from the high school, if not later, just like it happens in Germany and a lot of other places. Of course, it's not to discount that there's a lot of value in non-industry aligned courses, let's say philosophy, humanities, sciences, and so on, but all of this can be learned online. So we need to, I think, decouple what goes into making a person into a full individual and see whether we can combine them in creative ways instead of a college. Colleges were invented in way back, and I think Oxford was 1500, 1600. Obviously, today we need to rethink whether that is still relevant. I think humans are the same. We are same species as we were evolved in 15, but the context is very different. So we can really rethink from first principles.
I read a blog post of yours around money. I think you were reading a book, and it was just an explanation of that book, where you explained how money is being printed, and it's just a very new concept. And there's this new thing in the market called Web3 and cryptocurrencies. So, what are your thoughts there? Are you bullish on them specifically as a store of value, and how they're trying to tackle this specific problem of currencies?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a new thing, obviously. I think Bitcoin paper came 2009. Yeah, so it's been there for a while. Uh, Obviously, I think it has some very useful and interesting innovations, and it has utility also. The way I think about it is to see instead of going to extremes that this is something which is the best thing is sliced bread, this will change everything, to the other extreme where this is the worst thing for Earth and so on. I think one needs to see what use case does something like a blockchain or Bitcoin solve that nobody else can solve. What has been unfortunate is that people have tried to push use cases for blockchain that can be solved through traditional simple database, sometimes not even a database. And in that sense, there is a lot of hype which just always ties down. So I think things like, let's say, cross-border transactions, or if you have to do algorithmic transfers and so on, where traditional finance has a ton of friction, that's where it's better alternative. So we should see it like any other startup product. Does it do better than existing alternatives? I'm sure there are a couple of use cases, but we can't just say everything for blockchain is good or bad.
You are certainly very bullish on AI. I don't know if it's probably been happening for a while. I'm curious to understand why you're betting so much on AI. What's the reasoning behind this co-working space? And
I mean, this is a very selfish reason for me because I've always been interested in AI. Even before Wingify, I was writing neural network code in Visual Basic 6.0 20-25 years back. So I've always been fascinated by the ability for machines to think. But I think, this is passion, but second, I think also a golden moment in human history where we are automating work itself. So this is the first time in history where, I mean, in industrial revolution we automated lots of parts of work, but in some sense we are automating automation itself. So it just seems unprecedented. And I think looking back we'll see these years as big as fundamental inventions like electricity or internet or yeah, or the engine. So it just seems you're in the middle of something really big, and it's just exciting.
I read some of your blog posts on, for example, there was one about why machine learning work for some use cases, where you know f- there is this particular quote where you're saying a human would be able to read, understand, and relate to a joke, or say jazz from blues, but AI finds it a lot more difficult. Right today, one could with LLMs one could say that they are somewhere closer, because as humans we understand a lot of our the world around us via language, right? And language also plays like a incredible social role in how we understand the world around us. So now that we are putting language at the center of intelligence, how do you think your position today has changed?
Are you asking whether there's some fundamental limitations to current way of?
Are language models still are are they still stochastic parrots, or do they have semblance of intelligence because they seem to have some kind of language
Yeah,
understanding?
I think it really I mean, like most questions, it depends on how you define things. I think they're both stochastic parrots plus intelligence. For predicting the next word, you obviously have to know so much. If even if you say the capital of France is, you have to have a lot of background knowledge to be able to do that. But that's at the same time, LLMs are trained just on language, while let's say humans, we are embedded in multi-sensory data. Even if I'm not speaking anything, if I'm in front of you and probably from my face you can see I'm anxious, angry. When I say something, you can interpret something very different. And we're also very experimental. We'll go in the world, intervene and learn from it. So LLMs are much further away from how humans learn. And also, I think the biggest deficiency is still that a human, you tell the rules once of a board game, and you can work out through all consequences of it. So the sample size for you to learn a new thing is often just one data point. But with LLMs, you have to tell them a million things about in a million different variations. So they are intelligent in some senses because they obviously have a lot of background knowledge, but they are far away from how human who's truly an artificial general intelligence operates. And I think we still have a few major breakthroughs missing before we get there. And that's what makes me very excited, that we're not just done. A lot of people think we are done with chat GPTs and anthropics of the world, that now what's there to do? But we still are missing many fundamental breakthroughs before we can say AGI is there.
You made an interesting point about multisensory data, right? Like if you have been following some of Carl Freisten's work, he talks about this free energy principle where you all the inputs that you get are it's via your sensory inputs. What do you think about like pursuing AI in that direction, or is there some work going on there?
I think a lot of people are working on, I think it's called active inference, the field. A lot of people are working there, but it's still in a very V0.1 MVP kind of a thing where people are building models of intelligence, but so far nobody has demonstrated that it can be scaled up to a significant fashion. I'm very optimistic about brain and bio and life inspired models of intelligence because that's the only proof we have of artificial general intelligence. So I do expect a lot of insights to come from how just generally biological creatures are able to exhibit intelligence.
The interesting thing about when he talks about the free energy principle is that it's not just a human, right? Like there are anything else that can respond to its environment could also exhibit free energy. So that brings me to I saw quite a few of your blog posts around panpsychism. So I'm curious, what is your general position about it? And if that were the case, then uh, does it Can you really remove intelligence and consciousness apart? Can you have intelligence without consciousness?
Yeah, so I mean, I do think you can decouple these things. Consciousness for me is the ability to experience things. Let's say when you're dreaming, you're just passive. I don't think you can say dreaming intelligent in the traditional sense of intelligence. Intelligence I define as, let's say, trying to pursue goals and having actions in favor of those goals, trying to create a version of the world that you prefer versus one that you don't prefer. So intelligence in that sense is very active, but you can definitely experience things without being actively involved in them, and dreaming is a perfect case for it. So in that sense, it is possible that I mean, a lot of entities in the world could be experiential in the conscious sense, but may not be intelligent. And the other way around also, a lot of entities actually could be intelligent without having very, very deep uh, experiential sort of experiences. But intelligence also in that sense, I think we need to broaden the horizon of just, let's say, humans or biological entities. Like what says economy as a whole is not intelligent. What says countries and relationships between countries are not a form of intelligence. So I'm very excited about even the definition of intelligence being broadened from the traditional one where you're puzzle solving versus these systems that are trying to pursue some goals intelligently.
Switching gears a bit, I would love to know more about LossFunk. I think there's a lot of hype in India around this specific community. A lot of people want to get in, but the numbers are really low. So people want to understand what exactly is happening inside and how can they maybe in 6 months or a year become one of the students here.
Hmm. So I think in LossFunk, I'm trying to get in the people who already have a technical understanding. So I realized that there were community pools of people who were trying to build AI startups. So this is less about building an AI startup. It's more about going one or two levels deeper into what AI is technically. So it's also so if people want to get in to a community like this, I think they need to sharpen their technical understanding of what goes into, let's say, building models. How was ChatGPT built? What is a transformer? How does attention work? What is a key value cache? How does reinforcement learning work? So if you're able to open up a paper on an archive and you're able to read it and understand it, and you have coded a few things on Colab, maybe fine tuned a model, I think that's a great start.
That's beautiful. Do you have any specific papers that you recommend people read?
I'm starting with the attention paper, but there's just so many papers. I think at least the classics. There is a list that floats around in the internet. I think it calls Ilya's 30 list. It's a list that Ilya, the previous chief scientist of OpenAI, he recommended someone to go through. And I think it starts from a lot of classics and not just recent papers. Lan Yakun's papers, Hinton's papers, Benjiu's papers, even before probably starting with Alan Turing's paper, which laid the foundation of AI. So Google the list of classic papers in AI and ML. I think you'll find 30 to 40 papers. Going through it, and I know math can look very scary early on, but you should just download the PDF, upload it on Claude or OpenAI, and tell it to explain things. And don't give up until you understand. We have LLMs as magical devices who never get tired of explanation. So I don't get why more people don't understand it. Just keep drilling down more and more and more. And ultimately, I think math is just simply a set of relationships. And but you do have to spend time and effort. There's just no shortcuts to understanding it. But once you get that, I think you will be like much, much better. Even when you're building an AI startup, a lot of people say, I'm building a chat GPT wrapper. I don't need it, but I would differ. I think having an understanding of how basics work will always help, no matter what abstraction level you work.
Makes sense. Could you talk through some of the projects that these guys are building so people can try to target similar projects?
This the projects, for example, some people are trying to build voice operated robotic arms. So in the last batch, people actually 3D printed robot arms. We have a 3D printer here, and then they connected them to streaming API, voice API of ChatGPT, and connected it to a model. So they trained those two arms to pick up different candies and balls and so on and so forth. Where you can just say, "Can you pick up the red ball?" And if there are multiple bombs, there's a camera. It will first see the red ball and pick it up. Then some people try to build. a self-improving model. In fact, that's a paper I co-authored with some IIT Roorkee students, where you have the model, instead of having a different model, you have the same model give outputs that you feed back into it for continual improvement, which should model know a lot more than they say. So things like that at all, again, abstraction levels, where some people are trying to build recommendation systems using LLMs. So instead of traditional collaborative filtering kind of a thing where you have a user matrix and an object matrix, now LLMs have so much of information. Could you have a generalized recommendation system that works out of the box with a cold start problem?
Coming to the questions that people had on Twitter, how can we minimize the risk while taking a decision?
I think it should start by defining the risk. A lot of time, risk is hazy, vague sensation in the head. But in modern societies, risk is actually much, much less than what we intuitively feel. It's very unlikely that you, for any decision to really either bankrupt you or to put you in jail or to physically harm you and so on. So uh, our responses around risk is evolved in an era which no longer is there, in a hunter gatherer society where we were in danger of being eaten by a predator. Today the risk is much more milder than, like, the risk is probably of your friend coming and saying, hey, what stupid thing you're doing. So is that really like worrying about? Because the upside is much, much more. So for a decision, I think you should always contrast what's the upside versus the downside. And in most cases, in most decisions, the downside is much, much less versus the potential upside.
Right. I think generally this is just risk awareness in this country, which is mostly led by parents to not try to start up, especially in your early years.
I think even there, that's what I'm saying. I don't get what the risk is. So people should really start defining what risk means. If you're starting out, for 1 year trying to work really hard, I think you're much ahead of other people who've just gotten a job. Just all Most of the forward looking companies would any day hire an entrepreneur who failed versus someone who's just spent 1 year at a career at a regular job. So risk is actually an opportunity if you think very deeply about it.
Yeah, I think it's just very hard to convince yourself also.
But again, if students are relying excessively on their parents' opinion, which were evolved in an era of scarcity when India was just growing, then they should even ask themselves if that's the right opinion to have. I mean, this might sound blunt, but I think an 18-year-old has a right to vote to choose a prime minister. That person should be starting to think very deeply about what he or she wants to make of her life. Relying on parents' opinion for a very long period of time, you should just know that opinions were formed in a very different era, which is no longer. I mean, they mean you well. Everyone's parents mean them well, but they might just be operating with a set of assumptions that are no longer true. So you should be thinking for yourself and for your future.
That's amazing advice. I mean, this is a very weird question, but will the job market experience a bull run in the near future?
It always have bull and bear phases. It just everything in the world runs in cycles. So yes, it will have a bull run. You just don't know when and why.
Um, what skills should young devs focus on in the current market?
The fundamentals. I think they're absolutely the fundamentals. Because when you work on fundamentals, you not just acquire the knowledge for that fundamentals, but you actually acquire the confidence for problem solving. If you're able to work at a very deep level in any field, then you have a confidence that you are thrown a new problem, you can solve it instead of having a very surface level understanding of some libraries and so on. All of these come and go, but the fundamentals of thinking and how you approach problems, they always remain there in high value.
If if a student right now from I can get, if they come here and are in this surroundings, they'd be super motivated to start up for sure. They wouldn't want to join a job. They'll build the best product. They will struggle with marketing. That's not taught. That's something engineers don't like, talking to users. They want to be behind the laptop. So is this a learnable skill, and if yes, what should one do to learn marketing?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a learnable skill. If you think about it, the top companies, the tech companies in the world, are all founded by engineers. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, all of them have been technologists at heart. And if those people can do it, so can anyone else. An engineer to learn how to write, how to communicate, how to pitch the product, how to design a presentation for a customer, That is relatively much easier versus for a person who knows all this to pick up coding. So this is definitely learnable. Just like you learned engineering skills, you can learn all of these soft skills. Just have to just keep at it. But the mindset that you can't do it will obviously help you to not do it. So if you start with an assumption that I'm an engineer, I will never talk to a customer, never do a sales call, then you're just making it happen. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. But you should think about all the engineers are who are creating these really big companies and changing the world, and all of that requires not just coding but actually going around and selling and marketing as well. So it's definitely learnable. I did it. I'm an engineer. I never had an MBA course, never did that, never required it.
Yeah, and also this whole interfacing with LLM to build your product itself changes the nature of it, right? So if you are kind of forced to describe it in English as to what you really want to accomplish, so I think to me it feels like, it becomes like this packaged skill set that one has to acquire, and versus something I know C or C++, and this is the only thing that I'm going to focus
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Maybe engineers can start simulating LLMs as potential customers. They can say, "This is a product I'm building." You pretend to be a customer who's not interested in it, and do a simulation. Try to convince an LLM that this product is really worth it. I
Makes
mean,
sense.
LLM is such a godsend where you have a perfect simulation of any persona out there, be it an Einstein, be it like a painter, be it a potential customer. You can have that thing acquire any type of clothes and just keep interacting. You learn a lot.
Yeah, do you plan to open source, like open source is the wrong word, but make these lectures, whatever is happening here, available for
Yeah,
everyone?
they are on YouTube.
Or
So if
they're
you
on
go to
YouTube?
YouTube, type LossFunk, we have a channel. We put everything online, and the idea is to create an ecosystem and not just something which is very closed. So more and more, I'm trying to find more and more ways to include more and more people without really diluting the quality and without trying to just hyperscale on day one.
Right, makes sense. Do you think there's any community like an MIT or a Waterloo in India right now where cutting edge research is already happening, where a lot of good papers are coming out, for example?
Obviously, I think in isolation, IASC, IIT Madras, and a lot of IITs, BITS Pilani, there are people and groups who are doing it, but there is no cross-cutting community, and that's what I'm trying to build. Trying to build a community that binds these different people and institutes together, so that frontier research and frontier AI can come out of India for the world. So that's where my goal in my head is try to build an ecosystem versus just a single product or a
Right.
company.
Makes sense. Do you have any monetary goals from this eventually, or are you just having fun?
I'm just having fun. I've had an exit, so I not really seeing this as a money making enterprise. Although alignment of for profit incentives always helps, um, but the primary motivation is to have a lot of fun and to double down on an opportunity which I feel India, being the world's most populous nation, should have the most number of geniuses, statistically speaking, most number of patents, most number of Nobel prizes, most number of AI research papers, but that's not happening. Why is that not happening? So it's a very interesting question for me to keep digging down
Yeah, that's a very interesting tattoo.
into. It
C-
is.
Could you, is it Dali's?
Yeah.
Could
The
you,
painting is called Persistence of Memory. Yeah. So it is Dali. Dali was a surrealist painter, and this is about a melting clock and a person walking by it.
it feels like it's quite important to you, so that such that it's a tattoo. So I'd love to, if you want to talk about it, you can. Otherwise,
I think this is just time as a concept. This is very fascinating, where this keeps on flowing. You can't grasp it, you can't stop it, and it's, in some sense, time doesn't exist for you before you were born. It'll never exist after you're dead. So this is all you got, and it's also interesting in science. None of the theories you can find now as a moment like now as a data point doesn't exist in any of the theories. It says t, but t can be anything you set that variable to. So where is this now coming from? So in I think multiple ways, how did time start? Will it end? I think it's just a super fascinating. concept which you can't grapple and grok fully. So it just, I find it fascinating. Yeah.
Do you think AGI would ever be able to answer the question? Or, for example, in the Douglas Hofstadter book, what is the answer to everything? The response to S42. But in seriousness, do you think we will see a g- sentient or a general intelligence to a point where it can actually answer some of the biggest questions that we have in the universe?
I mean, it will be able to answer, but whether we'll believe it or not is the other question, right? I mean, we have answers all over us, like whether God exists or not, what kind of God exists. People have all sorts of opinions and answers for it, but not everyone aligns to the same answer. So it's not the ability to give an answer, but for some of these questions, people just tend to rely on their own personal intuition. And I don't know, AGI will be able to have one single answer, or whether it's even desirable to have one single answer to these questions. I think having multiple answers to these big questions is a beautiful thing.
One question that a lot of normal students and average students is struggling with right now is the engineering market got very saturated. The number of engineering grads, CS grads are very high, and AI came, so people don't know what to do, so they're just chilling.
Chilling?
Yeah, chilling. Like literally,
Really?
they're not coding. They know getting a job is really hard, or they just don't want to do it. And then when I ask, so what are you doing, and they say nothing. So
Okay.
two questions on this. One, do you procrastinate? Did you back in the day? How do you be productive? And two, what should these students focus on? Considering it's so comfortable these days, like you can be on your phone all day, and you wouldn't know. You'll still be happy by the end of it. There's a lot of comfort today.
Yeah. I think motivation is very difficult thing to change for anyone. I don't think it has anything to do with AI. People are building big companies all the time. Like something like Cursor just came last year. Now it's $100 million company, and in fact, right now there's an explosion of products and companies that are happening because now it's just, you can just do so many more things in a magical way, an easier way. As a leverage, you can build prototypes, show it to people, double down on it, change design. Just you can build literally, I think, one new application every single day if you put your head and mind to it, and eventually something will crack. Eventually you will get first 5 customers, 10 customers. If you don't get it, it will get into your portfolio, help you land a job. So I think the basics have not changed. But someone is just procrastinating, not sure what anyone can do about it. The motivation has to come from inside. If it doesn't come from inside, it's a really bad situation to be in. But I honestly don't know how to fix it, because a lot of people feel that you become fit when you join a gym, but that's not true. You can become fit whether you join a gym, or in fact most people who join a gym don't become fit because they quit in one. So it is really like uh, orthogonal. If you have a deep desire and burning fire to do something, you'll do it irrespective of what time and age you are in.
Makes sense. Do you struggle with procrastination, or did you back in the day?
No, actually not. I struggle the other way around. If you have like a block of time and I don't know what to do with it, I start really thinking about what I could be doing. So now I become a little more mellow, where I'm okay to have an unproductive block of time. I prefer that. But for the longest of times, I was just not a, for good or bad, not a single moment where I felt I was procrastinating.
That's beautiful. Any last thoughts on people?
But on this also, I mean, one more thing. I think a lot of people think motivation should come first and then action would follow. But it's the other way around. Action creates motivation. So maybe a practical tip for people is, if they're feeling unmotivated, just do something, anything. The feedback loop from that will give you more and more motivation, and you'll do more actions and there'll be more motivation. So action always precedes motivation. I think that's the people who are even clinically depressed are given some advice, where if you're not feeling like it, perhaps just drag yourself, go to the gym, do something, because mere act of action can a lot of times produce motivation. So you don't have to wait for motivation. Just get up, do even a little thing, just clean up your room. That perhaps give you a motivation to open up your laptop and learn something or do something.
I think where most people struggle are they're back home, especially after college. They just move back home, and then they're in this rut of family. The all their motivations and learnings are coming from their parents.
Yeah, they should stop listening to parents and family. The internet is so big; they need to have role models and idols who they relate to. Being biologically associated doesn't mean people will have good or valid advice for you. They'll have good intentions for sure, but whether their advice is rooted in data is something people should question. Question everything. You're a young person. If an 18-year-old won't question, who would question? 18-year-olds in the history have brought down entire countries and empires, and today you can't just give up your hands and say nothing's happening for me.
Any last parting thoughts for the audience, people in 18 to 24? What should they focus on?
And they are the future of India, and IT services may or may not have a future in India. So, which means as a nation, we have to end up building products, inventing technologies, and so on. And it is all possible. People are people, irrespective of whether they're in Silicon Valley or India. It's just that they are in different context. And internet is a magical place where you can change your context at will. Just open Hacker News, and your context will change from wherever you are to Silicon Valley. Get inspired, build things. So make internet and communities on internet your local horizon instead of the physical place you are based out of, because it's India's future relies on completely 18 to 25 years old right now, and we need a lot of people to be doing a lot of interesting things for the country to have any hope of growing at the pace it was growing. It's all the best, I guess.
Cool. Thank you so much, Paras, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you guys the next one. Bye bye.